CTA has convened 3 550 forums last year. The first was Shaping Tibet's Political Future, the second was 550 Youth Forum, and the third was Towards a Resilient Community. All the three forums contain 4 themes within them. So today I will be stating the themes and recommendations of the first 2 forums, that is Shaping Tibet's Political Future and 550 Youth Forum. The following recommendations were provided by the participants of the last 550 forums, and these recommendations are not necessarily accepted or supported by CTA or Kasha. It's being made known to the public in consideration of the upcoming 3rd Special General Meeting of Tibetans, in which one of the topics to be discussed is 550 Vision. Similarly, we look forward to receive more recommendations from the new participants in the upcoming 550 Youth Forum 2019. Please come with your suggestions, ideas and visions to Dharamshala in the month of August. The 4 themes for 550 Forum Shaping Tibet's Political Future are: Number 1, Tibet and PRC, Establishing Constructive Engagement and Negotiations, 13 abbreviated recommendations. Theme 2, Tibet's core relationship with India and Asia, 7 abbreviated recommendations. Theme 3, International Relations Communications, 13 abbreviated recommendations. Theme 4, CTA Leadership Toward the 550 Vision, 11 abbreviated recommendations. Total number of abbreviated recommendations, 44. The recommendations under the first theme, which is the Tibet and PRC Establishing Constructive Engagement and Negotiations, are: Number 1, encourage the rise of Buddhism among Chinese, particularly genuine Tibetan Buddhism, as well as a deeper understanding of Tibetan Buddhist culture and values and the essential role of the Dalai Lama and other Tibetan masters. Number 2, continue to strengthen the Tibetan Buddhist world in India and the Himalayan states and India's place as a source of world Buddhism and Nalanda's importance in this respect. Number 3, articulate the advantages the PRC and its leaders can derive from engaging in dialogue and resolving the Tibetan issue in accordance with the middle way approach. Develop persuasive arguments why genuine Tibetan autonomy, as envisaged in the Memorandum on Genuine Autonomy, would be beneficial to the PRC and not pose a problem to it. Number 4, increase the cost to the PRC and its leaders of not engaging in dialogue and of not resolving the Tibetan issue by encouraging more international governmental and non-governmental action on Tibet, strengthening and raising the visibility of Tibetan moral, legal and political case, and reinvigorating initiatives to impact public opinion on Tibet. Number 5, encourage business, government and community leaders who have contact with Chinese leaders to try to persuade those leaders of the benefit of dealing with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He is best placed to gain support from the Tibetan people for a reasonable and sufficiently beneficial agreement once concluded, whereas this could be very difficult to achieve when he is not there. Number 6, recognizing that the next 5-year period is critical, it is equally important not to let this perceived time pressure define the CTA's actions. This can result in loss of leverage and limit the Tibetan side's options and goals. Number 7, increase Chinese language outreach to Chinese in the diaspora and the PRC itself in the Chinese language. To further this goal, Chinese language skills among Tibetans need to be improved. The greater access to Chinese in Hong Kong should be used to the fullest extent. Continuing teachings by His Holiness to Chinese audiences as well as by other Tibetan lamas is also highly recommended. Encourage Chinese academics who understand and support the Tibetan issue to write about it. Number 8, in addition to pursuing comprehensive negotiations with the PRC, the CTA can consider different scenarios and alternative channels to create dialogue on less comprehensive subjects, such as a visit by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to China or Tibet. Other possible subjects for dialogue would be environmental issues on the Tibetan Plateau, issues related to climate change and water, and education, example, study abroad programs. Number 9, the diversity of voices in the Tibetan community is important to the success of the middle way approach and should not be discouraged. Such diversity is, moreover, in keeping with the CTA's democratic values and system, embedded in an open and democratic society in which
Dissent is normal. If criticized by the PRC or others, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the CTA can emphasize this and also make the argument that when people are repressed, they will push back. Number 10, Tibetans and the Tibet movement, other than the CTA, should enter the Chinese dialogue on ethnic and minority rights and policies and take strategic positions in this regard. This should be done without accepting the Chinese classification of Tibetans as a minority or ethnic group, which comprises the Tibetan position on the status of Tibet and the Tibetan people. Number 11, the CTA should conduct regular dialogues with select countries that can influence the PRC and international opinion and could explore ways to work Tibet into the bilateral security dialogues some of them have with the PRC. It is important to find appropriate ways to engage with the broader administration. Review the U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China's annual report on China to ensure it continues to include strong concern and recommendations on Tibet. Number 12, the importance of Tibet as a water tower of Asia needs to be emphasized and convincingly argued. Engagement should be sought on the environmental, climate, and water issues with Asian countries as well as in regional and international forums. The CTA or His Holiness the Dalai Lama could host spiritual leaders of downstream states to discuss and declare water as a communal resource. Number 13, ways should be found to put Tibet on the agenda of multilateral forums such as UNESCO. Working on proposing heritage sites was proposed, UN COP discussions, etc. Consider the possibilities and possible advantages of using online participation at UN human rights meetings in Geneva. The recommendations for Theme 2, which is the Tibet's core relationship with India and Asia, are: Number 1, consciously promote Tibetan studies in Indian universities. This could be done by supporting the creation of a dedicated central university in Ladakh and by endowing chairs in selected Indian universities. The CTA should also encourage dialogue between traditional Indian and Tibetan scholars. Number 2, working with the Himalayan regions of India could be an effective way to promote unity with the Indian people. As part of this, the CTA should engage with members of the Himalayan State Assembly. Additionally, pushing to include the Bodhi language in Indian universities could further the Tibetan cause in broader states and Himalayan regions of India. This could be combined with the teaching of Tibetan language in the Himalayan regions. Number 3, encourage involvement of religious leaders who have millions of followers in environmental and water-related projects initiated by Government of India, state governments, or other Indian institutions. Given the sacred or otherwise spiritually connected nature of many mountains and rivers in or originating from Tibet, such as involvement would be natural and provide greater awareness. Number 4, the environmental desk of the TPI does excellent work on environmental issues in Tibet and should regularly share this information with concerned departments of the Government of India, state governments, and parliamentary groups. Number 5, most of the ancient Buddhist texts are now preserved only in the Tibetan language. It would be desirable to digitize and translate these texts, which form a very precious Indian national resource, into different Indian languages. Number 6, the CTA should consider supporting efforts to start teaching Tibetan Buddhism online. Number 7, CTA should work towards supporting any initiative by India to promote India as the birthplace of Buddhism. However, the CTA must be careful about using Buddhism as a political tool. Boundaries around Tibetan Buddhism as a cultural and spiritual tradition should be respected. The recommendations that come under Theme 3, International Relations, Communications and Advocacy, are: Number 1, the CTA should maintain a coordinated narrative across its public relations and communications. The narrative should communicate the CTA's vision, intent, values, and plan of action, the importance and relevance of CTA's vision and the movement in general, and what is needed to achieve the stated goals. The narrative should be followed across the organization and coordinated with His Holiness the Dalai Lama's office. Number 2, the narrative should highlight the positive aspects of the Tibet movement and avoid coming across as solely a victim narrative. It should not portray the tragedies and grievances of Tibetan people as the center point of the movement, but instead communicate the hope for the future and values of compassion and non-violence as rallying points for supporters. Values will be the key connection point for many audiences. There are many points that tie together His Holiness the Dalai Lama's teachings and the goals and actions of the movement, politics of compassion, empathy, non-violence, and oneness, as well as civil liberties and democracy. Particularly as many currently see liberal democratic values under threat around the world, including from the rise of China, the Tibetan freedom movement offers a narrative to support that explicitly challenges these trends. For those looking to promote and defend democracy and stability, Tibetans are natural partners. For those committed to nonviolence, human rights, justice, and compassion, the survival of the Tibetan nation through the protection of the people's rights should be a part of their mission. Within the narrative, there should be a sense of not just what Tibet needs, but also what Tibetan can offer, stemming primarily from its valuable cultural and religious traditions, its decades-long fight for democratic values, as well as the environmental significance of the region itself. Number 3, the CTA should identify priority countries most likely to provide the CTA what it needs, either due to their disposition or resources. The list should include Africa, South Africa and Botswana, Asia, India, Japan, Taiwan, Australia, Nepal and Mongolia, Europe, UK, France, Germany, Baltic and Nordic nations, former Soviet bloc countries and the EU, North America, US and Canada, South America, Brazil and Argentina, potentially Uruguay, Chile, Paraguay and Panama as well. As a general rule, the CTA should seek to work with like-minded governments that share a commitment to the core values of democracy, human rights, the rule of law, and the non-violent and dialogue-based conflict resolution, currently or in the near future are able to engage in human rights dialogues with China, have substantive interest in climate issues, genuinely understand the painful journey of the Tibetan people due to their own history, including attaining freedom from communism, totalitarianism, or colonialism. Number 5, increase the profile and status of CTA leadership by increasing the frequency of visits abroad, organizing meetings with foreign diplomats in Delhi, joining the Interparliamentary Union, more often inviting the leaderships of other countries to visit Tibet and Dharamshala, and ensuring all high-profile meetings are coordinated between His Holiness the Sikyong Kaluns, Speaker of Parliament, and MPs. Number 6, in consultation with TSGs, Parliamentary Friends of Tibet groups, and local supporters, each OT should create and share with DIIR a relationship map for priority countries. These maps would detail individuals, most likely but not exclusively government officials, who would influence the CTA's ability to attain support, whether general or specific, from the given country. In addition to identifying the individuals, the maps should provide information on their disposition towards the CTA and the movement wherever possible. Number 7, the CTA should behave not as an NGO but as a government in waiting, working strategically with other partners who can take stronger positions due to their resources and international standing. This applies to other areas of work as well, but it is particularly important for CTA's engagement with multilateral institutions, given how these institutions delineate and react to governments versus NGOs. Number 8, the CTA should support the formation of an international contact group on Tibet at the UN or simply as a less formal group of interested nations. As with contact groups or other issues, semi-regular meetings of the relevant officials from each involved country could share and receive information on Tibet and the movement, and the group could serve as a signal of international concern about the situation in Tibet. Number 9, a coordinated campaign in Geneva focused on spurring action by various UN institutions should be explored. Such a campaign should include voices from inside Tibet and China, potentially via active online participation if possible. Number 10, finally preparing the groundwork for a truth and reconciliation process in the PRC could, in addition to improving such a process, if and when one actually occurs, provide a valuable base for international human rights monitoring and advocacy on Tibet. Number 11, media for the CTA, OTs and TSGs should be coordinated centrally by a CTA media hub. Breaking news, newsletters covering events or policy issues, and other materials can be released simultaneously by each of these offices so as to ensure consistent and wider coverage. As part of this, each OT should identify influential journalists in their region to develop relationships with and have them contribute content for distribution throughout the CTA media ecosystem. There should also be certain standards for content on the hub, such as a glossary of Tibet-specific terms and language to ensure that words are used appropriately and uniformly and are not substituted by Chinese terms. Number 12, to maximize its reach, the CTA must develop a distribution strategy. Any such strategy should leverage existing connections that have a significant media presence, most notably His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who, for example, has 16 million Twitter followers. The CTA should identify in-house personalities representing a diverse selections in terms of gender and age who can serve as more personable representatives of CTA messages in the media. Many more people follow the US ambassador in India than follow the US embassy in Delhi, for example. The CTA could partner with NGOs with large media profiles to leverage their communication structures to promote issues of mutual interest, such as climate change. The CTA should never miss easy opportunities to promote their communications. CTA officials should always publicize the website and social media channels while traveling and during public events. Finally, the creation of a virtual Tibet in which individuals around the world could appreciate to show their support for the cause could offer a way to communicate with Tibet's strongest supporters and potentially, if combined with a voluntary subscription fee for citizenship, offer a way for them to directly contribute. Number 13, to avoid confusion with or subversion by PRC provided information and propaganda, the CTA needs to manage the presence of Tibet-related information on search engines through search engine optimization for its sites and popular information sources such as Wikipedia. The recommendations that come under Theme 4, which is the CTA leadership toward the 550 vision, are: Number 1, CTA should explore with GOI and other possible donors and supporters the establishment of a Tibet house or Nobulinga in every major Indian city. The purpose of these institutions would be to introduce the local populations to Tibetan culture and to the Tibetan story, while also building friendships, trusting relationships, and ongoing political and social support. Number 2, CTA should collaborate with GOI and state and local governments to establish tourism programs around Dharamshala and the Tibetan settlements that focus on Tibetan culture and religion. The monasteries, nunneries, and other institutions in the Tibetan settlements are unique exemplars of Tibetan culture and religion. Carefully and respectfully designed tourism programs for Indian and international tourists could substantially benefit Indian and Tibetan communities in several ways. Number 3, CTA should consider restructuring or repositioning the offices of Tibet so that they can devote more of their time and resources to advocacy, communications, and leadership responsibilities for Tibet-related issues and for the Tibet freedom movement more broadly. They must work more effectively and consistently with TSGs, TAs, and the Diaspora communities on local, regional, and global levels and make it a priority to inspire, lead, and support the Tibet freedom movement in their areas. Number 4, CTA should actively encourage the establishment of chairs in Tibetan studies at universities around the world. CTA should also seek to increase the number of Tibetans obtaining PhDs and doing graduate work focusing on policy analysis and research related to Tibet. Increasing the number and quality of academic and professional articles and conferences about Tibet and Tibet-related issues, and engaging a wide variety of students, including the students from PRC, around these issues should be a high priority. Over the long term, these efforts should increase interest in and support for the Tibet freedom movement and for CTA as a legitimate representative of the Tibetan people. Number 5, CTA should establish a new hub for sharing and disseminating information with Tibetans inside Tibet. The focus would be on providing regular and accurate information from CTA and other reputable sources about Tibet-related issues to Tibetans inside Tibet, assuring as much regular communication as possible at the personal and family level among Tibetans inside and outside of Tibet, and facilitating as much communication as possible between non-Tibetan people and organizations with Tibetans inside Tibet. This could be complementary with TPI and might coexist or be part of the contemplated media hub in Delhi. This new hub might also be organized as an officer or desk within CTA. It should be conceived as a complement and supplement to existing informal channels that Tibetan people are already using to communicate with friends and family inside Tibet. Number 6. CTA should begin planning for this new hub with an analysis the current methods, platforms, and media that Tibetans inside and outside of Tibet are using to communicate with each other. This analysis should contain a similar analysis on a global basis to explore and examine how other people and institutions might be communicating with Tibetans inside of Tibet. This analysis should include interviews, newly or recently arrived Tibetans, Tibetans in the refugee and diaspora communities, Tibetan youth specifically, non-Tibetan people who have visited Tibet recently, and friends of Tibet around the world who are communicating with people in Tibet with a particular focus on friends in Hong Kong and Taiwan and in the media. The objective of this analysis would be to be sure that planning for the hub is informed, up to date, and takes into account existing private and informal communication channels and platforms, as well as current security, firewall, and personal risk issues. Number 7, CTA should seek out and develop on its own or in collaboration with others high-level Tibetan language content for dissemination inside Tibet. This content should include information related to CTA priorities and activities, recent political and social developments related to Tibet, corrections and objectives to misinformation provided inside Tibet and around the world with respect to issues and conditions inside Tibet, and a broad range of cultural educational material for adults, youths, and children. Tibetan language, social media, and entertainment materials could also be disseminated if not already available. Number 8, CTA should consider utilizing focus groups with people from inside Tibet when contemplating or introducing new policies, programs, or campaigns that might impact Tibetans inside Tibet. Such an inclusive and consultative process would enhance and strengthen bonds and relationships and also reinforce CTA as a legitimate representative of the Tibetan people. Such focus groups might be particularly useful if dialogue with PRC can be established and issues directly impacting Tibetans in Tibet are considered. Number 9, CTA should focus on developing a cadre of researchers and scholars fluent in Chinese language with specialized knowledge and expertise about PRC and the situation and issues inside Tibet. This cadre of expert Tibetans should be tasked with the helping to develop more sophisticated strategies for building better linkages, networks, and communications with Tibetans inside Tibet. It should also provide research and analysis that would counteract Chinese propaganda and misinformation. Number 10, current trends indicate that funding for international development assistance will be shrinking around the world. Trends also suggest that there will be intense and increased competition for limited development assistance funding. In light of this new environment, CTA should create a dedicated development and fundraising office. This office should include Tibetans who are experienced, professional, and focused exclusively on fundraising. If Tibetans with this experience are not currently available, CTA should seek out friends and professional philanthropy groups who could help to train them. This must be viewed as a long-term commitment and undertaking. This office should be responsible for identifying, approaching, and managing relationships with international development agencies as well as private donors and other sources of grant and donor funding. Number 11, CTA must seek to attract the best and brightest talent within the Tibetan community. Many Tibetans in the refugee community and in Diaspora cannot relocate to Dharamshala, cannot afford to work for CTA within the current CTA salary structure, and might not be able to work for CTA full-time but would be pleased to work on part-time basis. Therefore, CTA should explore the feasibility of establishing a working from home program along the lines of working remotely programs that are highly effective and well established around the world. This might attract in particular young Tibetans with excellent education skills and experience who are in diaspora and Tibetans around the world who would like to contribute but cannot relocate or make full-time commitments. This might also help to counteract the impact of out-migration from the refugee community in India and supplement skills and expertise that are difficult to find in the refugee community in India. 550 Youth Forum Shaping Tibet's Future, 17 to 20th August 2018. Theme 1. Tibet and PRC, Importance of Historical Ties and Establishing Constructive Engagement and Negotiation. Theme 2. Inclusion of and responsiveness to Tibetans inside Tibet and diaspora. Theme 3. Young Voices in the Tibetan Freedom Movement, Communications, Advocacy, and International Relations. Theme 4. CTA's Leadership Towards the 550 Vision, Visionary Leadership and Resource Mobilization. The recommendations that come under Theme 1, that is the Tibet and PRC, Importance of Historical Ties and Establishing Constructive Engagement and Negotiation are: Number 1. Support initiatives taken by Tibetan students overseas by endeavors such as reaching out to Chinese students, intellectuals, and for creating awareness about Tibet through workshops, seminars, conferences, etc. Number 2. Utilize technology for creating awareness on Tibet, example online platform for history education through podcast, videos, ebooks, virtual discussion, etc. Number 3. Broaden historical framework, example history shouldn't start from 1959, not prejudiced but balanced official narratives in school history textbooks. Number 4. Adopt latest pedagogy methodologies in updating history textbooks. Number 5. Record databases of prominent Tibetan human resources by CTA and reaching out to intellectuals, academicians in various fields of studies, both in Tibet and exile. Number 6. Provide academic freedom to intellectuals, scholars, academicians, and experts, no matter how deviant their discourse narratives are to that of the official stand. Number 7. Encourage history education as an integral part of Sunday schools or similar types of programs. The recommendations that come under Theme 2, that is inclusion of and responsiveness to Tibetans inside Tibet and diaspora are: Number 1. Sikyong's monthly radio address to Tibetans in Tibet, contextualized and carefully crafted so that it could bring Tibetans inside Tibet closer to CTA. The address should be translated in regional dialects. Number 2. Strengthen Tibetan national pride, Galshan, through targeted storytelling on Tibetan digital mediums such as Tibettv. Solicit anonymous one-paragraph stories from Tibetans and choose a feature story to produce a brief online video. Make Tibettv more accessible to global Tibetans by recruiting staff who can subtitle at least some major programs. Create more programs and platforms that recognize Tibetan art and represent diverse Tibetan experiences. Art-based scholarships, create art and film festivals, main support through funding. Number 3. Create a secure space for Tibetans to share information about Tibet and encourage that by ensuring utmost security of the information providers. CTA should be accountable to the information providers and carefully utilize information received from them. Number 4. Collect detailed information about every political, social, economic events from Tibet and carefully document and analyze current events for more record. The information should be publicly available. Number 5. Build an accessible report on socio-economic conditions and pathways inside Tibet by evaluating Chinese development policy and work by Tibetan and non-Tibetan individuals, NGOs, and local communities. This can facilitate potential individual engagement between Tibetans in Tibet and those in exile. Number 6. Facilitate avenues for relationship building with Tibetans working on the ground in Tibet, example, desertification, afforestation, and other environmental issues. Number 7. Provide economic empowerment by ways of coaching instructions that are carefully compiled and analyzed. The recommendations that come under Theme 3, which is the Young Voices in the Tibetan Freedom Movement, Communications, Advocacy, and International Relations are: Advocacy and international relations. Number 1. Incubate young professionals through scholarships, incentives, and fellowship programs and enlist students to work in CTA upon graduation. Number 2. Create a program to recognize a young brilliant Tibetan, CTA 30 under 30 or maybe 40 under 40. This recognition will serve as a source of great encouragement to them as well as inspiration to other Tibetan youth. Communications. Number 1. Empower next generation of Tibetan storytellers by providing mentorship and training in digital media. Number 2. Broadcast successful mentees via Tibettv or develop a pilot podcast program by partnering with international media outlets. Number 3. Digitize Tibetan archival research, journals, and documents and make them accessible to public via Tibet.net or other online archive platforms. Number 4. Promote media independence, investigate journalism by creating a non-governmental media platform. This platform should be used to verify unreliable news sources, promote better digital media literacy among Tibetans, and provide digital security education for Tibetans in exile and the ones returning to Tibet. CTA can facilitate a forum for intercontinental communication between various Tibetan associations and Tibet support groups in Diaspora, Tibet-related events, cultural festivals, expert panels in local communities, universities. Campaigns and activism. Number 1. Establish proper protocol, communication channel for engagement with youth, responsiveness to Chinese propaganda and other related urgent issues by regularly updating the list of campaign dates in a calendar format. Number 2. Officers of Tibet need to create spaces for resource, information exchange, support youth to organize events and conferences, provide training to youth so that they can educate Tibetans around the world on better and more open political discourse and engagement. The training should be available in different languages used in Tibetan diaspora communities. Number 3. Promote community associations and groups as soft power centers to counter Chinese soft power centers such as Confucius Institutes. CTA should issue clear directives to student organizations and Tibetan associations around the world to encourage political engagement of Tibetans. The recommendations that come under Theme 4, which is CTA's leadership towards the 550 vision, visionary leadership and resource mobilization are: Number 1. Department of Education should develop a civic education curriculum for all schools, including Sunday schools in the West, create more national pride in schools through workshops and leadership programs, and develop a summer program approximately 2 weeks for Tibetan youth. It should include Tibetan history and language, visiting Tibetan communities. Number 2. Incorporate secular ethics training in school curriculum. Number 3. Harness Tibetan soft power through workshops for CTA civil servants and leaders, in particular the staff of the Office of Tibet. Number 4. Build a Tibet Institute of Leadership and Governance to incubate trained leaders and entrepreneurs that will serve the government. High-level summer leadership training program for 25 Tibetan youth leaders, 2-week summer program, market it like Jewish birthright program at CTA for youth education. Number 5. Build better feedback mechanisms for CTA. Number 6. Create a virtual marketplace for human resources that is linked with a workflow information system. CTA can post their human resource requirements online. Tibetans can apply online or contact CTA for more information. Number 7. Revise CTA recruitment because professionals find it difficult to join CTA. Tailor question paper based on the need of the job rather than having a uniform question paper for all the position. For example, IT staff have the same Tibetan language requirements as other CTA staff. Number 8. Establish human resource division run by professionals with human resource management qualification. Also review promotion system within CTA. Number 9. Drive a campaign to increase number of Green Book holders and consider a tiered model so that professionals and businessmen can contribute a greater amount. Number 10. Incubate profit industries for generating employment opportunity and revenue. Number 11. Establish a new school specially for Tibetan students from abroad by utilizing existing schools that are empty. The cost of running these schools will be borne by the students in the form of tuition fees. Furthermore, any Tibetan student from India could also join this school provided they are willing to pay the tuition fees.